He is my son, and I love him. Now hear me. Run. The candle was down to a stub in its dish. Between them, flat on the table, lay a belt of heavy canvas. It had gone the color of old oats. Addie Naylor pushed it back across the wood. Ma'am, I marry him tomorrow. I know what you do tomorrow. Then you know what you're saying to me. The older woman did not blink. I know exactly what I'm saying to you. You're his mother. I am. 27 years this fall. Addie's hands stayed in her lap. And you came here to tell me to run from him. I did. Take it or don't take it. But don't tell me later that nobody told you. Santa Brackett pushed it again. She did not hurry about it. She set it square in front of the girl. She left her hand near it a moment. Then she took the hand away. That is why it comes tonight. After tomorrow, I can't walk over here in the dark. Ma'am, folks are laying the tables out there right now. I know what's out there. I counted the boards myself. Out in the yard, somebody was still hammering trestle boards together for the tables. The sound came up through the floor. Addie looked at the belt. She did not put a hand on it. Before the summer was out, that same belt would lie open on a clean cloth in the middle of the Brackett freight yard. The justice of the peace would be standing over it. Half of Chalmers County would be watching. The big plank gate would be thrown wide, and the drop bar would be out of its brackets and down in the dirt, where anybody could step over it. None of that had happened yet. Tonight there was one candle, 2 women, and a thing on a table. If this is the kind of story you came here for, go ahead and subscribe. It costs nothing, and it keeps these coming. Now, let's get back to it. Prentice sat in a bend of the Chalmers River, 90 miles from anywhere that counted. Ambrose Brackett owned the part of it that did. The mercantile faced the street. Behind the mercantile stood the freight yard. Behind the freight yard, the family lived in 4 rooms, with a stove between them. Near about everything that came into that town came through his gate. He carried the key to it on his belt. Santa Brackett had come the whole way on foot, and she had come alone. That was the first thing Addie noticed. The Bracketts did not go anywhere alone. There was always a hired man, a step behind, with a lantern. Because Ambrose liked the town to see the lantern. Tonight, there was neither. Just a woman in a gray shawl in the doorway, breathing hard, looking back down the row of dark houses. She stepped inside. She pulled the door to behind her, and she left the latch up. Addie watched her do it. It was a small thing. It stayed with her a long while after. Sit by the stove, ma'am. You're cold. I won't be long. Sana reached under her skirt and brought out the belt. She put it in Addie's 2 hands and closed the girl's fingers over it. Keep this on you. Not in a trunk. On you. It was heavier than it looked. Something inside it shifted and knocked. Ma'am, what is this? That is a way out. Addie went still. Now mark 3 things. Sana held up 1 finger at a time. Her voice stayed low and flat. The way a person talks when a thing has worn smooth from saying. The day he turns a key on you. The day he throws something instead of saying it. The day you go to walk out and he puts a hand on you. He has never done any of that. Not yet, he hasn't. Ma'am, do not wait for the day he means it. She said that part slower. By the time a man means it, it's late. It was late a good while before that. Addie sat down because her legs told her to. She turned the belt over on her lap and worked the buckle open. Coins. Small bills folded twice, soft as cloth. A flat iron key with the ward filed down, and a strip of pasteboard sewn along one edge with blue thread. A ferry pass, the kind the crossings gave out to regulars. There was no map. There was one line on the back of it in a small, tight hand. Doss Ferry. Ask for Dovey. Who is Dovey? A friend of mine. Say nothing to her but my name. The key opens the back door of the old fulling mill. There's food in it and clothes in it. Addie ran her thumb along the inside of the belt while the older woman talked. The lining was doubled, 2 thicknesses where one would have done, and a line of stitches down the length of it that did not seem to hold anything together. She let it go. She had 100 questions, and she picked the wrong one first. Did you make this for yourself? Sana looked at the candle. I made it. I never used it. Why not? That's a story you don't need if you stay out of my house. Addie waited her out. And if I don't stay out, then you'll get it sometime. Addie set the belt down on her knees. If you think this of him, why let tomorrow happen at all? Because he is not bad. She said it fast. When she went on, her voice had come down. He has hated every last thing his father does since he was 9 years old. I let myself count that as the same as being different. Isn't it? No. Sana stood up. Hating a thing is not the same as not doing it. I had 30 years to learn that, and I still had to be shown. Down the row, a dog started up. 3 short barks. Sana went rigid all over. Nobody knows I came here. Not your aunt. Not him. Ma'am. And when it comes, don't wait on me. She had the door open already. You go first. One gets out, and then there's a door open for the next one. It doesn't work the other way. Addie sat up with it. She did not undress. She put the belt across her knees and sat in the one good chair. The candle went out on its own around 2. She stayed where she was after that. On the wall hung what she was to be married in. Her aunt had made it over from a brown poplin of her mother's. It hung there all night, with the shape of a person still in it. Hester Naylor came in at first light, already dressed, already talking. There's coffee. Don't argue with me about. She stopped in the doorway. You have not been to bed. No, ma'am. Are you sick? No. Hester came the rest of the way in. She pushed her spectacles up onto her forehead and looked at her a good while. Who's been at you? Addie had settled this part somewhere around 3 o'clock. She would not say the belt. It was not hers to hand around, and the woman who gave it to her had walked home in the dark to keep it quiet. Somebody told me about his temper. Somebody who'd know. Hester sat down on the edge of the bed. She was a tall woman, and she made the bed look small. Then we quit. This morning. And I'll say it was me that done it. Aunt Hester. Her aunt put a hand flat on the quilt between them. You can come down off that wagon at the church door. I'll still be standing, right where you left me. I want that understood. I know it. Then say the word. Addie looked at the dress on the wall. I want to ask him myself. Hester did not answer. If I quit now, I'll be guessing at him the rest of my life. Addie turned the belt over once on her lap. I'll ask him straight, and I'll watch his face while he answers, not the answer. And if the face is wrong, then I've got my own 2 feet. Hester went to the press in the corner. She came back with a flat packet wrapped in oilcloth and tied with string. Then you take this today, not next month. That's the spring. That is the spring, the house, and the washyard. The only soft water in this county. She put it in Addie's hands. It's in your name from this morning. My hand's on the back of it. So there's no arguing later about who gave what to who. Addie turned it over. Her aunt's writing ran along the bottom edge, small and square, and leaned hard to the right. The same hand that had kept the washhouse book since Addie was 11. She would have known it anywhere. Ambrose Brackett is going to want this. I know he is. He'll ask. Hester took her spectacles down off her forehead and folded them. Then he can ask me. I've been told no by better men than him. The sun came up. Down the road, the Brackett wagon was already turning out. Seats, scrubbed, and horses brushed. Addie put the brown poplin on. Then she ran the belt around her waist underneath. and let the skirt down over it. The canvas was stiff, and it did not sit easy against her. It made her stand straighter than she would have. They held the wedding in the freight yard. It was the only flat ground the Bracketts owned that would hold the whole town. Ambrose walked the rows before the preacher came. Everywhere he stopped, the ring of keys on his belt swung and knocked against itself. Addie heard him before she saw him. She would go on hearing that sound a long while. It was Tucker Rand who dropped the crate. His hands were wet, and the corner caught a table leg, and a whole nest of glassware went down into the dirt. The yard stopped talking. Ambrose came across that ground faster than a man his size ought to move. Then Lyle stepped in front of him. "Not today, Pa. He just cost me. I know what it cost." Lyle did not move. "Then get out of my way. Not with the town standing here." Ambrose looked at his son a moment. Then he turned off toward the scale house. The yard let out its breath. Somebody laughed, and the talking started up again. Addie found she had a hand pressed flat against her own chest. She wanted to be able to say later that she had seen him do it. Lyle waited until his father was gone. Then he crouched where Tucker was picking glass out of the dirt and said something too low for the tables to hear. Addie did not hear it either. She only saw what it did. Tucker had been kneeling. After Lyle spoke, he got lower. Across the yard, Sana was watching the same thing, for about the length of a breath. The two women looked at each other over the crowd. Neither of them ever said anything about it. That night, Addie sat down on the edge of the bed with her hands in her lap. "I've got 3 things to ask you." "Ask then." "Don't stop me going to see my aunt. Don't take anything of mine without asking. And when you're angry, don't lock a door. Don't throw a thing, and don't put your hands on me to keep me somewhere." Lyle laughed. It was a real laugh, easy, a little surprised. "That's a queer set of wedding presents to ask a man for. Will you give them?" "I'll give them. I'm not my father. I've spent my whole life not being my father." Addie went to the little table and came back with a sheet of paper and the pen. "Then write it." He stopped laughing. "Not angry. Just stop. You want it in writing." "I want it in writing." He turned the pen over once in his fingers. "Folks don't do that." "Then we'll be the first ones." He wrote the 3 lines out in a round, clear hand, the way a man writes, who keeps freight books for a living. He signed under it with a flourish to make it a joke again. "There. Am I a married man now, or is there a 4th one coming?" "3's enough. 3's easy. Then it won't cost you anything to have kept them." Addie folded the paper twice and put it away. She did not tell him where. For a while, he kept every one of them. He brought her coffee before he went down to the yard. When she said she was going out to Row Spring, he had the mare hitched before she finished asking. The belt under her skirt began to feel like something she carried for no reason. She found the ruined cloth in the 2nd week at the back of the north warehouse. "What's all this, Mr. Rand?" "Water damage. Wagon went into the ford, spring before last." "And the brown along the edge?" Tucker pulled a corner out to show her. "Stove fire. 2 years it's set there. Nobody's touched it? Nobody's had a reason to." Addie ran a yard of it through her fingers. "There's nothing wrong with this cloth. It's marked, ma'am. It's the wrong color." "That's a different thing." She took the freight book down off its hook to see what had been paid. Ambrose had written the line himself. She knew his hand from the mercantile ledger. Discarded, no value. Addie copied the page number onto her wrist in pencil. She hung the book back exactly where it had been. She carted the ruined bolts out to Row Spring and put them through twice. Why won't the town well do? Hard water fights the dye. Comes up blotched every time. And the spring? Addie lifted a length of it dripping into the light. The spring takes it clean. They came up a deep gray blue with the water still moving in it. In the sun, it looked like cloth with weather in it. 30 bolts sold in 9 days. She counted the money out on the mercantile counter with Ambrose watching. The first thing she did was set aside wages for the 4 women who had worked the vats. He put his hand flat on that pile. They were paid to wash. They got their wash money. They stood in cold water past their elbows for 6 days. And Addie did not move her eyes off his hand. And they turned trash into stock. That isn't wash money. Trade is not charity, girl. No, sir. It's arithmetic. I still come out ahead. You'll teach them to expect it. I mean to. He took his hand off the pile. He did not say she was right. He went out to the yard and started shouting at somebody about a tailgate. The house got quiet after 9. Addie learned the sound of her mother-in-law making her rounds. Back door, kitchen door, then across the yard to the plank gate. Every night, the same order. The 3rd night she went out and stood with her. Sana had both hands on the drop bar. She was not pushing it down into the brackets. She was lifting it an inch, setting it back, lifting it again. I can see to the doors, ma'am. You ought to rest. It's an old habit. Were you ever broken into? Sana set the bar down and wiped her palms on her skirt. Not from outside. She went in. Addie stood a minute longer with her hand on the wood. She had understood the first part right off. The rest took longer. The older woman had not been checking whether the gate was shut. She had been checking whether it would come up from the inside. Going back through, Addie passed the winter storeroom under the stairs. There was a hasp screwed to that door frame. A good heavy one, new brass, the screws still bright. It was on the outside. The first crack came over a bolt of cloth that was never missing. Lyle brought the freight book up from the yard after dark and set it on the table between them, still open, his thumb holding the place. Count came up short on the gray wool. By how much? 1. You had the key to the north house on Tuesday. I did. Your father asked me to bring 2 bolts up to the store. 2. He turned the page back and forward again, like the number would be different the second time. Then where's the 3rd one, Addie? I don't know where it is. We can walk down and count it in the morning. Do you know what a bolt of that goes for? His voice had come up. Not a shout. Something worse than a shout. Because it was the same size as his father's voice. And it was coming out of a smaller room. Everybody says they don't know. Somebody has to be responsible for. He brought the flat of his hand down on the book. The lamp jumped. A cup went over and rolled and did not break. Addie sat still and watched her husband's hand, closed now, on the table, white across the knuckles. When she spoke, it came out low. Lower your voice. 1. If you think I took it, say that to me. If you don't, we'll go find it together in the morning. From the yard door, Tucker Rand cleared his throat. Beg pardon. Mr. Brackett sent a bolt of the gray down to the Selby house this afternoon as a gift. He said to put it in the book tomorrow. Lyle did not turn around. He stood over the freight book a long moment with his hand still shut. Why in hell didn't anybody say so? You come straight up the back stairs, sir. There wasn't a chance. Nobody said anything after that. Tucker went away. Lyle went out. He came back a quarter hour later with a paper sack of candied peel, because he knew she liked it, and set it where the cup had been. I got ahead of myself. I'm sorry. Addie did not push the sack away. She did not open it either. Thank you for the peel. I'm not going to forget the rest of it. I said I was sorry. You said you were sorry. You didn't say what for. He put the sack down. For thinking you'd taken it. That's one of the 2 things. He waited. You didn't ask me. You told me. And then you hit the table because the answer didn't come fast enough. She folded her hands. Next time, ask first and find out, and then be angry at whatever's left. His jaw set. He picked one piece of peel out of the sack and ate it. standing up, and made a face like the joke was back on. You're a hard woman to apologize to. Not so hard. It only has to be an apology. He did not answer that one. 3 nights later, well after the house was dark, a woman in a gray shawl went down the river road with a sack over her shoulder. Dovey Rusk was waiting at the landing with the lamp already out. She took the sack without a word. They carried it up through the willows to the old fulling mill, and Dovey held the door while Sana stacked it against the back wall. Salt, meal, a bundle of women's clothes in 3 sizes, a tin of matches. They stood looking at the stack. It came almost to Dovey's waist now. 9 years I've been keeping this dry for you. I know it. So is this the year, or isn't it? Sana pulled her shawl back up over her shoulder. It isn't for me, she said. Not this time. Ambrose waited until the plates were down. That spring of your aunt's. We'll put it under the bracket name. Addie set down the dish she was holding. Rose Spring is in my name, sir. I know whose name it's in. I'm telling you where it's going. May I ask why? I've a freight contract in the fall. They want ground against it. Addie stayed standing. Then use your own ground. It stays in the family either way. Ambrose went back to his meat. It doesn't. Not the same pocket. In this house, they are. Sana reached over and moved the gravy an inch. There's no hurry on it. Not tonight. Ambrose put his knife down. 30 years, and you still speak at the wrong end of a table. He said it almost kindly. That was the worst of it. I took you off the county farm. 1 dress and a bad cough, and nobody coming for you. Every stick you own came in through my door. Your brother's board goes out of my till the 1st of the month. You might sit and let me talk. Nobody moved. Sana looked at her plate. She said yes, and nothing else. Addie kept her eyes on her mother-in-law. I won't sign the spring over. Ambrose's hand came out and shoved the platter away from it. It went off the edge and took a plate with it. Both of them broke on the floor. Sana's arms came up over her head. It was fast. Faster than a flinch has any business being. Her forearms crossed in front of her face. Then she saw what she had done, and put them down, and folded her hands, and sat still. Lyle was looking at the broken dish. So was Ambrose. Addie was the only one who saw it. She got the deed out that night, and put it under the loose board at the bottom of the wardrobe. It was gone by the next afternoon. The board had been set back crooked, and there was a handprint in the dust. She found Lyle in the north warehouse with the tally slate. Your father has been in my room. He did not put the slate down. You hid it under a floorboard. She waited to see if he would hear himself. That's what you want to talk about. I want to know why my wife keeps a deed in the floor of my house. Because somebody wanted it. She let him have a moment with that. You could have told me. I'd have kept it for you. That's the same thing you just called hiding. He turned the slate over and set it down. I'll get it back. When? He's put it up against the Selby contract, Addie. Down in the yard, Ambrose was walking Corwin Selby along the loading dock with a hand on his shoulder. He was pointing out the sheds and the wagons and the acre of good soft water. He could set behind a note if it came to that. She went at it again after supper, with the account books open. I can buy it off the note. I've the money from the 30 bolts. You'd spend your own money to undo my father. I'd spend it to keep my own ground. Lyle got up and went to the window. It isn't that simple. It's exactly that simple. It's my name on it. If I pull the spring off the note, the Selby contract goes. Then half this town learns we couldn't cover it. He turned around. You want to talk right and wrong. I've a payroll. You've my property under a note I never signed. Would you keep your voice down? No, sir. That was when he did it. He crossed the room, took the 2 account books off the table, and carried them into the winter storeroom under the stairs. Addie went after him, still talking when she came through the doorway. The door shut behind her. She heard the hasp go over and the pin drop into it. Lyle, we'll talk when you're calm. She put her hand flat on the boards. Open the door. An hour. That's all. She did not knock. She stood in the dark and made herself hear it again, exactly as he had said it. We'll talk when you're calm. As though she had been the one shouting. There was no window in that room, only a transom with a nail in it. Addie sat down on a crate of preserves. She found the buckle of the belt through her skirt and held on to it. She counted it out. Not the minutes, the list. The day he turns a key on you. That was the first one, and it had come. It had come from the man who wrote her 3 lines in a round, clear hand. He had signed under them for a joke. It was closer to 2 hours than 1. When the pen came out, Lyle was in the hall with a lamp. He had the look of a man who has been walking up and down. I shouldn't have done that. Addie came out past him with the books under her arm. I meant an hour. It got away from me. She stopped at the foot of the stairs. You put a lock on a door with me behind it. I know it. Then say what you did. He opened his mouth. He shut it again. He looked at the hasp and rubbed the back of his neck. An hour, he said. That's all it was. Addie went up. She lay where she always lay and stayed awake a long time. She had sat in that room the whole while with a millhouse key tied around her waist. The next evening she put her shawl on. I'm going out to my aunt's. We're not done talking. It'll keep till morning. She took her bonnet off the hook. We're done for tonight. I'll be at Rose Spring. You know the road. He came around the end of the table. Would you sit down? No. Lyle put his arm out and swept the top of the desk clear. The inkwell went first and burst on the boards. Pens, the tally slate, a tin of shot, the brass rule he had carried since he was a boy. The slate hit the door frame and cracked across. The room got very quiet. That's the second one. The second what? Addie looked at the ink running into the seams of the floor. Then she stepped toward the door. Lyle got there first. He put his back against it. Not braced, just standing. I'm not finished. I am. Move. Addie, sit down. That's the third one. She reached past him for the latch and he caught her wrist. It was not hard. He was not squeezing. It was only enough to stop a person going where they had said they were going. Addie did not pull or raise her voice. Take your hand off me. I'm not going to hurt you. Take your hand off me. He let go like the wrist had burned him. Addie. She had the door open, and she was through it. Sana was at the end of the hall. She had come up the back stairs at the sound of the inkwell, and got no further. She took in the ink and the 2 of them in the doorway. Go on then. Ma'am. Boots. Then the yard. Nothing else. Addie did not pack. There was nothing in that house she had brought into it. Lyle came out after her. Mother, where is she going? Where I told her to go. Because we had words? Was that all it was? He did not answer. Sana crossed the yard ahead of them both. She put both hands under the drop bar and lifted it out of the brackets. She did it easily. She had lifted it every night for 30 years. Take the river road, not the street. Ma'am, come with me. If I go tonight, he'll have men out by midnight, looking for 2. She put her hand flat between Addie's shoulders and pushed. I'll keep him here till morning. Don't wait on me. Behind them, Lyle stood in the middle of the yard, with his hands open at his sides. He had come as far as the water trough and stopped. He never could say for certain whether that was decency or the memory of his own fingers closing on somebody's wrist. Addie went out through the gate. One thing before we go on. Some of you have been here since the first of these. Some of you landed on it tonight by accident. Either way, say which one in the comments. I like knowing who's out there. Now, let's get back to it. The river road ran 2 miles down through willow scrub to the ferry landing. The front of the mill was shut and grown over. The back door was down 3 stone steps, weeds to the sill. The flat iron key went into that lock like it had been cut for it. It had been. Inside it smelled of dry grass and old lye. A bed frame with 2 ticks rolled on it. Salt, meal, a crock of lard. Women's clothes in 3 sizes. A tin of matches up where the damp would not reach. It was not what a person lays in for a night or two. She was still standing there when Boots came up the yard. Addie got behind the door and put her thumb through the ring of the pass. "Who's out there?" "Somebody who knows what's stitched on that pass." "Blue thread, is it?" Addie held it to the crack of the door. "It is." "Then open up before we both stand out here in the wet." Dubby Rusk was a head shorter and twice as wide through the shoulders, with a coil of rope still over one arm at midnight. She set the lamp down and asked nothing about the house. She took Addie's hand, turned it over, and looked at the wrist. "Anywhere else?" "No, nowhere." It wasn't. Don't finish that. I've heard the end of that sentence more times than I've crossed this river. She let go and went to build up the stove. She never used it herself, did she? Dovey fed a stick in. 9 years back, she came down this road with that belt on. I had the boat in the water. First light, we'd have been over and gone. What stopped it? He got word out here before I could push off. Said the county would drop her brother's keep the day she crossed. Said he'd let it be known his wife took money out of the till and ran. Dovey shut the stove door. She could stand being called poor. She'd been called that. She couldn't stand her boy hearing she was a thief. So she went back, walked up that road at 4 in the morning, and put the bar down behind her. Next month, she gave me the house key and started sending a little at a time. Addie sat down on the bed frame with the belt across her knees. It was long past midnight when she turned it inside out to shake the grit off. The lining was doubled. She had known that since the first night. She got a needle under the top of the seam and drew out 1 stitch, and it came away the whole length because it had been sewn to come away. There was a packet in there, flat and thin. Egg tickets, butter tickets, store slips from Marrow's, over the county vine, where a woman could hand a thing across a counter without her husband's name on it. Dozens. Then hundreds, going back and back. 3 dozen eggs. 4 pounds of butter. Mending, 1 shirt. Every 3rd or 4th one initialed in a second hand. Tucker Rand's mark. Then Dovey. 30 years of a woman writing down where every cent came from, because she had always known that someday somebody would stand up and say, she stole it. Addie went through them to the last 2 years. Those were not in Sana's hand. They were small and square and leaned hard to the right. Addie had been reading that, writing in the washhouse book since she was 11 years old. Her aunt had been moving the money for 2 years. The match had only been spoken of for 1. At the foot of the last slip, in newer ink, was a line that was not an account of anything. Whoever takes this owes me nothing. Only never be the one standing in a door. Dovey had the boat in the water before sunup. County seat by noon. The cars go east at 4. Addie stood on the bank with the packet buttoned inside her dress. What's across there? Anywhere. Nobody in this county ever finds a woman who gets on the cars. And the spring? Gone. Dubby shipped the oar. And her? Neither of them answered that, because they both knew it. I'm not crossing. Then you'd best have better than a feeling. I've got 40 bolts I'm still owed for, and the only soft water in the county, and a man who'll pay for that blue. Corwin Selby came out to the ferry on Thursday, because the mercantile had told him no. They say I can't have more of it. Brackett says his boy's wife ran off with the receipt. There is no receipt. There's water, and there's my hands. Selby took his hat off and turned it over. Can you do 50 bolts by the 20th? I can. Selby looked at the vats, standing on their sides in the weeds. Whose name goes on the order? Mine. Addie Naylor. Not Brackett. You'll want half down. By the end of that week, there was no indigo to be had in Chalmers County. Ambrose had gone around the county seat with a wagon and bought the whole of it at any price. And let it be known he had. Dovey brought the news up from the landing in 6 words. He's bought every pound in the county. On the Sunday, Lyle came down the river road, on foot, with 2 sacks over his shoulder. He set them at the edge of the yard and came no closer. That's dye, 40 pound, bought across the line at the going rate with my own money. Addie did not touch the sacks. Your father doesn't know, and it isn't his. He'd sent word over there, but he hadn't paid. I paid. He held a paper out at arm's length. It's not a gift. You owe me the price when Selby settles. My name goes nowhere near your order. She read the bill through twice. The figure was neither high nor low. It was the price. All right. On those terms. I'll stop and help you get them in. No. He stood there. You agreed you wouldn't come into my work without my say-so. That's still one of the 3. Something went across his face. For a moment, he looked like he would argue it, the way he had argued everything for a month. Then he put his hands in his pockets. That's fair. He walked back up the road. Dovey watched him the whole way to the bend. Well, that's one time. That's one time. The storm came on the 14th day, with 20 bolts out on the lines. Every woman off the landing came running. Tucker came down the road at a dead run with his coat over his head, and Lyle behind him with 2 draymen. He got to the end of the nearest line, put his hands on the cloth, and stopped. Can I help you now? Take that end. They got 18 in. On the last line, Tucker's boot went out from under him. A wet bolt came down full length in the muck. Lyle's head came round, and his mouth opened. Everybody in that yard heard the breath go into him. Then he shut his mouth. He stood in the rain with his eyes closed about 2 seconds. He put his own end of the cloth down in the wet, which cost another bolt, and went and got Tucker up by the arm. See to your leg. I'll wash it out myself. In the morning, the wind had taken a corner of the tarpaulin off the drying shed. 10 bolts of near-finished cloth had lain out all night in the rain. One of the draymen was getting it in the neck about the knots. When Lyle came into the yard, that was my knot. The man stopped talking. I tied that corner myself last evening. Nobody checked it because nobody knew I'd done it. He was looking at the ruined cloth while he said it. His face had gone red to the ears. Take the dye and the labor out of my price, Mrs. Naylor. I'll work nights till it's back. He stood a moment longer. Rand, that business at the wedding, with the glass, and the freight book. I never squared either one with you. I'm squaring them now, in front of everybody, because that's where I did it. Tucker did not know where to look. 9 bolts came back. The 10th got cut up for bags. 2 nights after that, the county constable rode out to row. Spring with a paper. Ambrose Brackett had sworn a complaint before the justice of the peace. His daughter-in-law and his wife had removed goods and money from the Brackett house over a period of years. There would be a hearing in the freight yard on Saturday, with the merchants called to hear it. Tucker came down the river road that same night and did not bother to knock. He's put her in the winter room. Addie stood up. The hasp's over. He's had a board nailed across the transom. Nobody's to speak to her before Saturday. He was still catching his breath. Ma'am, he means to stand her up in that yard and let the town look at her while he calls her a thief. Dovey was already reaching for her coat. Then we go tonight and take that door off. No. Addie had her hand on the belt. Girl, she is nailed in. If we break in at midnight, he's right. He spent 30 years being the only one in the room. Saturday, he's calling the whole town into it himself. She looked at the packet on the table. We go Saturday, in daylight, through the front gate, and not one of us on our own. They had the plank gate standing wide on Saturday, on account of the guests. The justice of the peace sat at a table brought out of the mercantile. 11 merchants stood along the loading dock. Ambrose had set a chair in the middle of his own yard, and he was in it. Addie came in at 10 with the whole landing behind her. She was in her work dress with the sleeves turned back, and the belt buckled on the outside of it, where every man there could see it. She did not go up to the table. She stopped where the open gate was still behind her shoulder. I didn't run off. I walked out. And I've come for my husband's mother. My wife is unwell, Ambrose said. Tucker Rand took his hat off. Your Honor, the hasp on the winter room's been over since Wednesday. There's a board nailed across the transom. 4 of us saw it done. That is my house. Selby spoke up from the dock. Brackett, you called this town out to weigh a thing. You can't weigh it with one side shut in a closet. Fetcher. The merchants made a low sound that was not on Ambrose's side. He sent a man. Santa Brackett came out into the sunlight with her shawl on. One side of her face was swollen. She fell against the stair rail in the dark, Ambrose said. I did not fall. It was not loud. It carried anyway. It was the first thing she had ever said in front of the town. He struck me Wednesday and put me in the winter room. He has done the one for 30 years and the other near as long. When I would not hand over my money, he locked the door. When I would not say it was nothing, he bought me something the next day and called me hard for not taking it. One of the Brackett cousins made a noise in his throat. These are things between a husband and a wife. There's no call. That is what I was told at 22. Sana turned and looked at him. So I kept it between us. 2 people knowing a thing and nobody else. That is how it got to be 30 years. Keep a thing in the family long enough, and it doesn't get kept. It gets taught. She let that sit. Ask that boy where he learned to stand in a doorway. Nobody said anything at all. Addie spread a clean cloth on the ground and emptied the belt onto it, in front of the justice. Coins, small bills, a flat iron key, a ferry pass sewn with blue thread, and a packet of paper the thickness of a thumb. She read them out, one at a time. 3 dozen eggs, 4 pounds of butter, mending, 1 shirt, a date on every line, and a figure beside it. All of it come across the county line too. Merrow's store, where a woman could sell a thing without her husband's name going on it. Tucker put his initials to what he had carried. Dovey put hers to what she had kept. The storekeeper from Merrow's had ridden over with his own daybook and said the tickets were his. And the goods, said the justice. The cloth she made her money on. Whose was that? Tucker had the freight book already open. His Honor can read it in Mr. Brackett's own hand. Discarded, no value. 40 bolts, sir. Written off 2 years back. He signed the page. The justice looked at it a while. He was not a fast man and did not hurry it now. There's nothing here to bind anybody over on. A man cannot write a thing off his books and own it again when it turns a profit. He closed the book. The complaint is dismissed. Ambrose got up out of the chair. He did not shout. He turned to his son, and when he spoke, it was almost gentle. And that was how everybody knew what it was. Take your wife home. Put your mother back in her room. Do that, and the store and the yard are yours the day I'm buried. He let it sit. Don't, and it goes to your cousin in the county seat. You'll be hauling freight for another man at 40. Every eye in that yard went to Lyle Brackett. He walked toward Addie. Dovey shifted the rope on her shoulder. Tucker moved half a step. Lyle went past his wife without touching her. He held his hand out to the man on the gate and waited. The man looked at Ambrose, then put the key ring into it. Lyle pulled the drop bar out of its brackets, carried it to the middle of the yard, and laid it flat in the dirt, where anybody could step over it. Then he knelt at the winter room door with the screwdriver off his own belt. He backed the hasp out of the frame, screw by screw, in front of all of them. There isn't a door on this place that holds a person now. You are my son. I know it. That's the whole trouble. He came back and set the store keys down on the justice's table. Hating a thing is not the same as not doing it. I found that out late. He took a folded paper out of his coat and gave it to Addie. It was the sheet from the wedding night. He had marked the 2 lines he had broken, with the date beside each. I'm not asking for anything. I wanted it written down, by me, and not only by you. Santa Brackett walked out through her own gate at 11 in the morning. The whole town watched, and nobody's hand was on her. Selby moved the order into Addie Naylor's name before he left the yard. Tucker asked for his back wages by the book, and quit where everybody could hear it. 2 draymen went after him, and then the man who kept the scale. Ambrose stood in a yard with the gate wide and the bar on the ground, and nothing left in it to shut. Outside the gate her legs went, and Addie caught her under the arm. She got the buckle open, ran the belt around the older woman's waist, and drew it up snug. "Ma'am, you said this was one you never used." "It was." "Then wear it out of here." Sana put a hand down on the canvas and left it there. "It's lighter than it was. It's got further to go." 2 summers on, the old mill had vats in the yard and a drying shed. Nobody called the cloth anything but Rose Spring Blue. Sana picked the stock and kept the wage book. She drew her own money on a Saturday and did not say what for. Tucker kept the ledgers. First time in 30 years my own name's been wrote in one. Lyle worked for wages, out of Addie's book, at the rate she paid everybody. People in Prentice thought that a strange way for a married pair to carry on. Folks say it isn't natural. Price and feeling don't get mixed at this house. They took a small place across the crossing after the second winter. She looked at the doors before anything else, and lifted both bars from the inside to see they came up easy. 2 account books on 2 shelves, 1 house box in the middle. They each had a key to it. The belt hung on a nail inside the front door of the mill. It hung low, about the height of a person's hand. A girl who came on in the spring stood looking up at it. "Ma'am, why is there money hanging by the door? Somebody'll walk off with it." Sana went on sorting cloth. "That's what it's for. Whoever has to go, goes. They don't have to say. When it's the day for it, there's no time to say." Addie folded a length over her arm. "Get gone first. Send word after. And if they never send it, then they got where they were going." Out in the yard, Lyle was rolling a barrel off a wagon bed. He straightened up. "And anybody who stands in front of that belt doesn't work here." He got his shoulder back under the barrel. "That goes for me first." Sana looked at her son a while and did not say anything. The night she came to that house, she had lain awake till 2, listening for the bar to go down. She had got up twice to see to a door that was already open. She had quit doing that some while back. She could not have said just when. If you've got this far, I'd like to know what you'd have done. Would you have given Lyle the chance to earn his way back, or told her to keep walking? Say so in the comments. And if this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next one.